Welcome back. We are joined now by Representative Rich McCormick, a Republican of Georgia. He's on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
Yesterday was Super Tuesday. What was your reaction to the results?
So on the presidential level, we had exactly what we expected. We expected Trump to come out handily on top. He's really close to seizing the day and moving on. I think that'll be good for the Republican Party so we can focus on the next stage, which is winning the general election. We had some pretty good results. We had Pat Harrigan win in North Carolina 10, another Army Special Forces guy. I'm going to be glad to have another military guy join us. We had another military guy who also is a minority who's now going to be the lieutenant governor nominee for the Republican Party. It's great to see diversity continue to build. Great to see more veterans. So I'm excited about that. And I think overall it's what we kind of expected.
And also, did you expect Nikki Haley? She's about to announce that she'll be suspending her candidacy. What do you think she should do next?
You know, she's a talented, still very young person who has a lot of experience. I'm sure she'll have something to add to the Republican Party as we move on. I'll be interested to see her relationship with President Trump and what their relationship results in. But I think she'll have lots of options, that's for sure.
You tweeted, turning now to the government funding deadline, you tweeted that about the CR that extended about 20% of the federal government spending to this Friday, that you were against that and you voted against it. Why?
I don't think we really got much out of it. I know that they talked about $200 billion of savings, but when you start doing the math, you start breaking out, it tends to be money games. You move around monies in different pots. But if you want to talk about substantial savings, we're $3 trillion more in debt now this year. $3 trillion post-COVID. We're already $34 trillion overall. Our debt to GDP ratio is about 130% and getting worse every single day. If we're going to be the gold standard of economies, if we're going to be the gold standard of currency, and we keep on getting downgraded, that doesn't bode well for our future. We keep on kicking the can down the street, saying we'll take care of it next time. It's a good thing we have a good economy now, but we're heading towards this cliff, not acknowledging that we have a problem that no other developed country has to this extent other than Japan. Japan is not a standard of currency. And it also didn't give us anything on the border. And I think if you're not going to talk about debt or the border, where's the win?
What, Congressman McCormick, I mean, it's the fiscal year ended September 30th. You've had several months to get these budgets done and agreed to, and it still hasn't happened. Voting against that CR, I mean, if that hadn't passed, the government would be shut down right now, or at least partially shut down.
It would be, but I think we can get some wins out of this. We still do have what's the point of having the majority if you don't get a win? There are several things that the Republican Party has 6% favorability that unite us, divide the Democrats, and are winning items, whether it be the border, crime, debt, energy, education. They're all winning items that we have an overwhelming support for with the American public, whether it be Republican or Democrat. Why not focus on a win in some of those areas that we can actually benefit the people, get what they want, and still complete a budget? I don't understand why we can't do that.
And if you'd like to join the conversation, you can start calling in now. Democrats, 202-748-8000. Republicans, 202-748-8001. And Independents, 202-748-8002. How confident are you that this is going to happen without a government shutdown, that those spending bills for running out in March 8th and then March 22 are actually going to get done?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me give a little shout out for the Speaker. Very difficult job, especially when you have a 2-vote majority. I think he is a conservative, truly a conservative. I think he's a very moral man, a very humble man. I don't envy his job. When talking to the whip and the deputy whip and what kind of jobs they have to do to get something done, it's not easy. And I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep us from a shutdown, and I understand the ramifications of a shutdown. But like I said, I think you can roll in some things that would be small wins that the American people, actually big wins. Listen, the border is a massive problem. I had some veteran groups come to my office yesterday, and somebody had the audacity to say, well, why is the military budget so big if we're not taking care of our budget? I'm like, wait a minute, if you want to talk apples to apples, let's talk about the 11 million people that are basically living off the American dime, the people who are being flown in here, crossing the border every way they can. They cannot produce. They can't have jobs. They can't pay taxes. You're 11 million people or however many people, pick your number, they only consume food, shelter, healthcare. That's all consumption. We have way less than that in veterans, but we're not taking care of our veterans who are homeless on the streets right now. We have our priorities messed up right now, and we're running ourselves straight into debt, not even taking into account Americans first. I mean, this is crazy.
Would you be okay? Would you be supportive of work permits for migrants?
No, because
so that
we're
they can
encouraging,
work?
not if you're going to come here illegally. If you want to talk about immigration reform, I'm all for it. If you want to talk about getting people here to work in jobs that we have open that Americans will not or cannot work in, I'm totally for that. As a matter of fact, I have an immigration reform bill for H-1B visas that will be transformational in a good way. So I'm all about that, but I'm not going to encourage people to break the law. Right now, we are literally encouraging people. We're rewarding people for breaking the law and making it harder for people following the law to become American citizens. That's sending the wrong message. Why would you ever think that people are going to follow the law if you encourage them to break the law and then punish them for following the law? It's insane.
Let's turn to overseas. You wrote in a recent tweet this, quote, Russia is making Iran and China stronger every day. They move forward with their invasion into Ukraine. Isolationism will never deter our enemies abroad. We need to protect America's interests by supporting our allies around the globe. So how should Congress resolve that impasse over Ukraine funding?
I think we should have individual votes. I truly believe that you can pass a support bill that's clean, that talks about military support for Ukraine, that will help us stop Russia's advance in Ukraine. I think that would pass. I think we'd pass that individually. I think we could pass a support bill for Israel individually. I think we could pass a border bill. Oh, wait, we did, like 9 months ago. The problem is the Senate. They do things with bad will. So if you don't wrap them together, the Senate will never pass it because they're not doing their job. They're not doing their job for the American people. So we can pass something on Ukraine, they'll probably pass that. Probably pass something on Israel, they'll probably pass that. Well, we already passed something on HR 2, which is the southern border. They will not pass that because they have no interest. This is where bad bills don't get the specific attention they need to get across the finish line. And if they're going to do things with bad will, in other words, we pass something, they only pass the things they want to, we never get our way. That's not the way it's supposed to work.
So you would be in favor of a clean Ukraine bill without border funding?
I think that's the way you're going to get it done in a timely manner. I think that we combine them together. I don't care. But the way they try to do it is put Ukraine, Israel, and a bad border where you say, oh, once we have 5 million people cross this year, then we'll do something about it. That's not a compromise. That's a giveaway.
You brought up the Senate. I want to show you what Senator Tommy Tuberville said, a Republican of Alabama. He said this to the Wall Street Journal: I haven't voted for any money to go to Ukraine because I know they can't win. Donald Trump will stop it when he gets in. He knows there's no winning for Ukraine. He can work a deal with Putin. Do you think there's no winning for Ukraine?
I think that's, I don't want to call him ignorant, but when you talk to people like Mike Pompeo, who has a little bit of experience, who is Trump's Secretary of State, who's been to Kyiv recently, who's talked to the people who are actually making decisions and seeing the gaming on the ground. And I've been to Kyiv. I've actually talked to 101st, 10th Mountain. I've watched the handover of weapons. I've watched their effectiveness on taking out 50% of the armor on the third largest army in the world, stopping their advance and actually getting ground back because they had the munitions they need. If we supply them the munitions they need, they are willing to make the sacrifice to protect their own land. It is very hard to go against an entrenched home army, regardless of who you are. Trust us. When we were going to Afghanistan and Iraq, we needed to use surge as the #1 army in the world, the #1 military force in the world. We had to use surge to go against third-rate armies to win those battles. And you could say we ultimately lost in Afghanistan. Ukraine is much more powerful than Afghanistan, and Russia is much less powerful than we are. Why do we say we're just handed over to defeat? That's ridiculous. Europe has a GDP of about $20 trillion. We have a GDP of $25 trillion. Russia has $1.8 trillion GDP. Do the math. There's no way they can win. Russia cannot win this if we support Ukraine, which we obligated ourselves to, not only the Budapest Accords, but with a unanimous NATO support.
So not all of your colleagues, your Republican colleagues, agree with that and want to stop Republican funding for Ukraine. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, I just say, if you don't understand the strategic importance of Ukraine, think about this as a top 5 nation in resources. We're talking about 70% of Europe's grain is grown in Ukraine. if you want to see the steel industry and the titanium and the other rare resources that would be consumed then by Russia, and when I say consumed, sold to people like China, Iran, North Korea, people who would do harm to us. We have Iran producing and disseminating drones that are used against the United States all the time, and we're doing nothing about it. We could literally undercut the Russian and Iranian energy production just by underselling them and producing this lower reimbursements for energy. We ruin their economy, put more embargoes on them. I tell you what, if you're going to produce weapons against us and disseminate and encourage people to use them against us, that's an act of war. I'm sorry. That deserves some sort of retribution. I think we should be using hackers. I think the same way they come after us, we come after them. If you're in a fight and you got my hands tied behind my back, that's not the way you fight a battle. That's not what we learn in any military school, whether it be war fighting or any of our military colleges. That's not the way you fight a war.
You ready to talk to the callers?
Let's do it.
John, Oregon, Democrats line. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yes, I just have one question. I'd like to know how much our credit rating has been downgraded since the Republicans have been in power in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, so you had one rating that went to a AA standard, just for one organization. But as we continue to increase our debt to GDP ratio, you'll see more people downgrade us. And once again, since Bretton Woods in like I think 1971, we have been the gold standard of currencies, because gold is not the standard anymore. The United States economy has been the strongest. They use our green dollar to be the industry standard. If that's no longer the case, we lose our economic advantage worldwide, and that would be devastating to our economy going forward.
Let's talk to Joe next, who is in Tampa, Florida, Republican. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, young lady. How are you?
We're great. Go right ahead, Joe.
I'm watching you guys live this morning, and I'm just wondering, the representative, isn't it time that Haley finally says, I quit, and I get behind Mr. Trump fully to reunite the entire Republican Party? She's not much of a Republican. She doesn't get behind a guy who's not going to run.
So, Joe, you know that Nikki Haley will be announcing that she is suspending her candidacy, but reports are that she is not going to be endorsing Trump. Your thoughts, Congressman?
Well, I think it's good to move on. I agree. The people have spoken. She's accepted that. Maybe she's not going to endorse, but it doesn't really matter. We're moving on, and we do need to unite behind one person. President Trump will be that person. The things that unite us are clear. Once again, I call it the elementary items of politics right now. A, B, C, D, E. The elementary items are the A, American dream, smaller government, more freedoms. Everybody in America loves that. That's at least a 60% issue. Border. Everybody in America agrees with us. That is a winning issue for us. Crime. Who wants crime in the name? Who wants to be soft on crime? Every time that happens, it costs us money. It costs us safety. Debt. We already talked about debt extensively. And then education. Education choice is overwhelmingly popular. That's how Youngkin won his governorship. That's how we won our first race in Florida when it was close with DeSantis. And then energy. Everybody wants safe, clean energy. We do it better than anybody else around the world. Those things unite the Republican Party, and it's something that Trump can lead us with that banner into the future, and we can win those elections focusing on those things, not on the things that divide the Republicans and unite the Democrats. I always want to warn my fellow Republicans, stop focusing on things that divide us. Focus on the things that unite us, that the people want, and we're going to win elections.
Well, speaking of endorsing Mr. Trump, you have endorsed the former president. Initially, you were supporting Ron DeSantis.
I was.
Talk about that.
Well, Ron DeSantis is a military veteran. He's proven conservative. He did a great job with Florida. If you look at, he grew his popularity by 19 points in 4 years while taking on all kinds of hard things during COVID. Opened up his economy, grew the population. People are attracted to Florida, not just for the weather. I mean, they've always had good weather, but it's their economy. It's what makes it, gives you the opportunities, the American opportunities, and more so in Florida than a lot of states. I think Georgia, Texas have also done a great job of that. I think Georgia has led the nation as the most business-friendly state for the last 10 years. So those southern states that are doing well in opening up their economy, that's why people are moving there, because it's great opportunities. And DeSantis did a great job with that. He'd have 8 years in the presidency. I thought he would have done a great job as a conservative who literally spoke about debt as one of the main items he wanted to tackle. I'm worried right now that even when we had the control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we had $1 trillion deficit back then, too. So we need to take this seriously. This is something that we can no longer ignore, and I thought he would have done a great job with that. But I'm happy to throw my support behind President Trump wholeheartedly and look forward to the results that we're looking for.
Raleigh, North Carolina, Independent Line. Tim, good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I have a comment and a question for Congressman McCormick. My comment is, since GDP does not account for ecological or social negatives, such as air pollution, like greenhouse gases, why is it that no matter Republican or Democrat, everybody wants unlimited economic growth on a finite planet that is driving the climate emergency? Could you please explain how we are going to live without a habitable planet? I think we're on track for hitting 2 degrees Celsius by the middle of next decade. So let's conserve life on the planet, please. Yeah. What do you say?
So my dad was a forest ranger. I'm a conservationist like Teddy Roosevelt. I want to see the planet survive. But let's have a realistic conversation about that. There's always going to be an emergency, whether it be a war or climate change or whatever you want to call it. Actually, there's a really good book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks about the Federal Reserve, how it was created, what kind of things we use as emergencies to grow the budget, to spend more than we should. This climate change idea, which has kind of become a religion, has been used as an excuse to overspend dramatically, where you can spend $1 trillion on greenhouse gases. And let's see how that's worked, by the way. Since you want to talk about greenhouse, let's have a realistic conversation about why the Earth is warming. I would state that your greenhouse gases, which you're talking about, carbon dioxide and methane makes up 0.0007% of the entire atmosphere. Now, you're going to eliminate all the cows and all the animals and everything else that produce methane, including ourselves? Is that your solution to tackling 0.0007% of the atmosphere? Or is it the carbon dioxide, which produces, I think it constitutes of 0.04% of the entire environment? 11% of that is from humans, by the way. And from that, 14% of that from the United States. And from that, 29% from all of our automobiles, all of our planes, all of our trains, all of our ships. So if you want to eliminate all of the stuff that the United States produces by spending $1 trillion into debt and ruin our economy, and then we can control everything that's going on, and we'll lose our influence in the world, by the way. And we're one of the cleanest energy producers in the world, by the way. But just all that, just to reduce the carbon emissions by 0.000167% of the atmosphere, you think that's going to actually affect global warming when you can actually look in the entire solar system? Right now, the other planets are warming too. Why is that? Is it the cars? Is it the carbon dioxide? Is it the methane? Of course not. Maybe we're having a solar flare. Maybe it's something, but I think you're putting all your eggs in the wrong basket. I don't disagree that there's climate change, but don't think that it's because of carbon emissions. At least open your mind to the science behind what we're trying to accomplish here. If you're trying to address plants that can live in a drier climate, or something that's going to be substantive, because we're going to need 60% more food stores in 2050 than we have right now. Better focus on those things we control, not on the things we can't control. Let's have a realistic scientific conversation instead of spending $1 trillion going more into debt, ruining our economy, and then not being able to help anybody with anything.
Dan's calling from Atlanta, Georgia, Democrat. Good morning.
Yes, Rich, I just want to just say this right here. You know that when President Obama left office, border crossings were at a 50-year low. Okay, and then also just remember, like you said, that Donald Trump put over $8 trillion, spent the most money of all presidents that in the history of this country. I am a veteran, and you, Rich, you and I both know that right now, if Donald Trump had been in office, Putin would be in Ukraine right now. He would be in Kyiv right now, sitting at it, sitting at the desk. And then also, I don't appreciate you are a fellow Georgian. Donald Trump came to Fulton County and said that we cheated during the election. He called me a cheat. Nobody that I know in Fulton County cheated. You're talking about voting twice. We have trouble getting people to vote once, let alone go through the process of cheating. How could you allow them to come to this state knowing that we ran a free and fair election?
All right, Dan, let's get a response.
So I covered a lot of ground there. I mentioned Obama and the border. I'll start there. Actually, ironically, I've listened to a lot of things that Obama said about the border. he was good about the border. It's amazing to see that how far we've come from the vice president of Obama was Biden. Obama talked about how important the southern border was, how important it was to have a sovereign nation, even defended his policies of exporting people who came here illegally, which he did more than any other president, by the way. And he actually defended himself when he's being heckled by people in the crowd whose mothers had been exported. He said, look, we're a nation of laws. We follow the law. If you don't like the law, change it. We didn't change any laws, and yet the border is now wide open. Why? Because Biden decided to let it be open. He doesn't need new laws to secure the border. All he has to do is say we're going to secure it, and it's done. He's literally going against states who are trying to help us keep our nation from being invaded because he wants to be invaded. When you have 11 million people come in and they go to these states that have lost congressional state districts because they don't have the same population, they're moving to Texas, they're moving to Georgia, they're moving to Florida, because they want to go somewhere where it's great to live, you're going to artificially manipulate that because in the next census in 2030, you're going to actually pick up seats based on people who shouldn't even be here, who came here illegally, who can't vote, who can't produce, yet you're going to get an extra congressional seats. Congratulations. You want to talk about cheating? That's cheating.
All right, Gloria in Bethesda, Maryland, Republican.
Yes. Good morning, Representative McCormick. Thank you for taking my call. Excellent questions this morning. So I want to address the first issue about Ukraine and the spending. Representative Barra was on prior to you and did not answer the question about the funding in Ukraine and where it was going. His answers, in my personal opinion, were unacceptable. We are accumulating roughly $1 trillion on top of the debt every 100 days. Congress hasn't passed a full budget in over 2 decades, and I am being conservative on that number. So these problems have been happening for a long, long time in D.C. And as far as Donald Trump and the $8 trillion, sir, in Georgia, this caller that just spoke to that was been happening long before Trump came into office. So the spending has to stop. We cannot afford these exorbitant debts. As far as what's happening on the southern and the northern border, the people that are pouring into our country illegally, the UN and the WEF have a plan called Project 2030. Go on the internet and search it, and it will explain what is happening here in this country. Our State Department has now set up what they're calling mobility camps in the Panamanian jungle. And what they are doing is they are reclassifying people as refugees and flying them directly into the country. They just flew in approximately 300,000 people within the last 48 hours. This has to stop.
All right, Gloria, let's get a response.
Okay, a few things. I'm not sure 300,000 in the last 48 hours, probably not a realistic number, just being honest. But I've heard also those numbers, 350,000 actually, over the course of time. I don't understand how that was hidden. I do see illegal immigrants in the airport with signs, not knowing where they're going, what they're doing, but they've been flown here. They're going to be taken up by NGOs and placed wherever they want to go. That's insanity. And the great majority of Americans understand this is a problem. Somebody's up to no good. When you're bringing people in America that only can consume, and look, we have 26 million people worldwide who are refugees, on million just in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, who have been displaced because of wars or ethnicity or whatever. It's a massive problem. And oh, by the way, it's only growing every year. We've been talking to people who talk about critical food shortages all around the world and wasting of children. 3 million kids dying in Africa per year just on starvation. You feed them, there's more of them. The next year, you have more of a problem. We need to come with more comprehensive solutions for sure. Let's tackle, in order what you said, the debt. I couldn't agree with you more. We're not taking it seriously. We have a spending problem. You have to grow the economy faster than the spending. We have a spending addiction. That's why I'm against this omnibus. I think, once again, we didn't get wins. We didn't get real savings. But if you relate it back to Ukraine, and I'm an Afghan veteran, and I remember we spent about $2 trillion in Afghanistan. Nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. 2 decades. I think 2,642 lives lost. And then we gave it back to the same people we took it from. So I'm very cynical about war, too. And plus, my friends die. I have friends that died in Afghanistan and Iraq. I wear the bracelet. I play rugby for them. I get it. But if you want to talk about the realities of a war in Ukraine, its strategic importance to us, the investment versus the return, we get 90% of that money comes back to us. So it's not like we're losing it. And we're replacing our stores that we're going to replace anyways. And we're not losing American lives. And we're keeping Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea from becoming stronger and causing us heartaches, not just militarily and strategically, but economically too into the future. Do you want a bigger, stronger Europe that helps us grow our economy, or do you want a bigger, stronger axis of people that are going to go against us that will cost us for generations to come? Not just tens of billions, not just hundreds of billions, but trillions into the future. That's the question you have to ask yourself. Strategically, does this make sense? Every Secretary of State we've ever had agrees we should be helping them. Where the money goes, though, we have to be extremely accountable for. I've been there. I've watched the handoff between 101st, 10th, going into Kyiv, and watched where that munition, how it's tracked. We can make sure it's way more accountable. We are making sure it's way more accountable than it ever was in Afghanistan or Iraq. Believe me, this is a totally different situation. Strategically, I understand the countries, and it's okay, by the way, to disagree with me. We don't have to agree on everything, by the way. We're not a cult. Our party is not a cult. We can disagree with each other and have a good scientific conversation, a philosophical conversation, and be okay with it. But understand there are strategic importance to that Eastern Bloc countries that, if taken over by Russia, will cause us massive problems for generations to come.
We've got a text for you from Michael in Texas. I was against you introducing the process of censoring Representative Tlaib. She was right from day one. You were wrong. What is your opinion now?
Well, if I was wrong and she was right, that means that most of Congress agreed with me, including 22 Democrats.
Talk about what that censorship was about.
So the censorship was about her verbiage. Now, we're allowed to say whatever you want to, but there are consequences to our actions. When we decided to censor her, it was because she was basically using rhetoric that was straight out of the background of Hamas and Hezbollah, where it basically talks the river to the ocean. It talked about basically eliminating Israel. That is not helpful when you're talking about an ally, when you're talking about a people. It's basically talking about genocide. Look, I don't want anybody to die in war. War is a horrible thing, and it's a good thing, or we go way too fond of it. We need to have a realistic conversation about what we're trying to achieve over there, whether it can be one state, two state, and there's lots to say. I could spend hours on that. I'm a foreign policy wonk. I love that stuff. I want to solve some problems, but her rhetoric is not only not helpful, it's actually caustic to any sort of peace process. It encourages violence. It encourages genocide. You should never pick your side when it talks about genocide. This is not about this. This is about ultimately getting to peace, which is what we should all want. She was censored. The people spoke by the representatives, which included a bipartisan effort to rein in the rhetoric that she was doing that we thought was extremely harmful.
One more question for you on the border from Irwin, who says, Mr. McCormick, how would a President Trump reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy when Mexico has said that it won't allow it?
They also didn't want to redo NAFTA, but they did, because tariffs work, because we have incredible leverage over Mexico. Let's face it, if Mexico could get their government straight, first of all, they could absorb a lot more population because they would be a top 5 nation in the world. They have resources of a top 5 nation. They have localities right next to the United States, the #1 economy with a $27 trillion GDP. They have a bell-shaped curve of their population. They have a good education system. They have massive energy sources. They could be so successful that they square away their government. The problem is we, as Americans, are funding the bad guys in Mexico, corrupting their system by buying drugs. We teach our kids from the time they were little kids that by buying drugs, they don't think they're going to die. No kid thinks they're going to be harmed. No kid thinks they're going to get cancer. But if you teach them instead, you're supporting murderers, rapists, and child traffickers, they'll say, well, I don't want to buy that. And then we'd solve Mexicans' problem, and we would grow their economy. We could have Remain in Mexico without a fight. But quite frankly, we have the leverage to make them do it. Trump showed it before. Mexico said, I don't want to do that. He said, oh, really? Watch what happens when you talk like that. And next thing you know, Remain in Mexico was a policy, and it worked.
Valdez in Mapleton, Illinois, independent line. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'd like to correct you on 2 flawed things you brought up. One is finance, the other is the border. I was born in California. I was in law enforcement, retired, and I'm a more American-born Mexican. I'll tell you that the border will never be secure because you already waited too long I was born in the 50s, and unfortunately, back then the Bracero labor was welcomed by Republican administrations as well as Democratic. They worked in the fields. Their conditions are horrible. I've seen it. I worked alongside being Spanish-speaking, and I can tell you right now, what you suggested about work permits, I'm against completely. Let's send them all back and quit using people. And the people who are here now working in the fields, Central Valleys of California, are not Mexicans. They're Central Americans and South Americans, and they wouldn't be here if we stopped messing around with Guatemala, Nicaragua, Chile, El Salvador. And you said you're a history wonk. Look up your history there. Look what the gringos have done to the Mexican people, and now they're doing to the Central Americans. And as far as finance goes, you can do whatever you want. I've never had debt of any kind. I retired 20 years ago, lived beautifully. But the world doesn't turn by what happens to me. Half the population in America is broke. They don't have any assets at all, and you know that. How can we?
Valdez, we're running out of time. Go ahead, Congressman.
So first of all, I didn't see anything that you disagree with me on. I didn't. You said what I said. Look, I would love to have. I used to pick berries in the fields with the migrant workers when I was in middle school before they had a bunch of child labor things applied to us. I was a busboy after that. I've worked those jobs. I encourage people to do that. If you want to see some backbreaking work, I couldn't agree with you more. I've read the book Economic Hitman. I understand what we've done down in Central and South America. That aside, we've done some very good things to secure the border in the past. We can do it again. It doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. We need to stem the tide. This is going to be absolutely corruptive to our government, and it's going to affect our debt. I couldn't agree with you more on the debt. I don't see where we disagree on anything. I want to see debt reined in. I think it's essential to our future. So we don't disagree on much, really. And the fact that we've done things historically to people, I can't do anything about that. I wasn't in Congress. I was in the military. In the 90s, I used to talk about the border problems. I used to watch it flying over as a helicopter. When I was a close air support controller, I used to actually have to stop firing ranges in order to get people out of my firing range who were sneaking over the border into where we were doing impacts. So I've been talking about this for a very long time. There's no hypocrisy here. There's no disagreement on what you said. I don't think that people should have work permits when they come here illegally. We agree.
All right. Representative Rich McCormick, a Republican from Georgia, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
And after